no investigation. This boy has...
There's not, really? It is to me.
Don't say any F's and stuff.
But I have to put her on the side and worry about
I'm gonna do what I gotta do for me and my boys and my kids.
Don't say any F's and stuff.
There is no investigation. This boy has...
There's not, really? It is to me. Right. Idiot.
I've done my best. It's hard, you know, that's real tough.
But I have to put her on the side and worry about the boys.
I'm gonna do what I gotta do for me and my boys and my kids.
Don't say any F's and stuff.
Live from the NBD Production Studios, you're in the lab with your host, Joshua Diaz.
There is no investigation. This boy has...
There's not, really? It is to me. But I have to put her
What's going on, everybody? Welcome.
on the side.
Welcome to the
and worry
lab.
about the boys.
It's good to be here. Good to see you.
But I have to
We got a special guest in the house today. It's a drunk turkey.
There is no investigation.
Don't say any
And I
F's
am
and
curious where that name came from, so we will find out. I've never seen a drunk turkey, but I have been attacked by a turkey outside my own house, minding my business.
on the side and worry about the boys.
A turkey is mean, but I couldn't imagine how mean a drunk turkey is. And speaking of drunk turkeys, Daniel from the Drunk Turkey Show, or is it Drunken? It's drunk, right?
Yeah, it's drunk. D-R-U-N-K.
So where did that name come from?
So, long story short, me and my buddies, Hyman Blue, we've been talking about doing a podcast probably for about 2-3 years now. And during the time that we were talking about it, I was watching Rocky. And when the name came to me, I was watching Rocky during Thanksgiving. And so during the show or during the movie, they were talking to Rocky about him. If he takes another hit, he was going to be punch drunk. And so the initial name of the show was going to be Punch Turkey. However, there's a show that's out there called Slapped Ham. And so I was like, man, that's too close. That's too close. So instead of using the punch word, we used the drunk word. And so we went with the Drunk Turkey Show. And in fact, our logo is new. We've had it probably a month and a half or so now. The one that we had before was one that I hand drew on my phone, and I had it had a black eye to pay homage to the initial original Punch Turkey show was going to be called. And
Why were you watching Rocky?
Oh man, it gets me going, dude. Right before I want to eat turkey, I gotta keep going, get fierce.
I didn't know that people. I mean, I didn't think people still watched Rocky. I thought it was like, just kind of.
Nah, it was on, man. It was on the I think it was like on TBS or something like that. And I really wasn't watching it so much as I was just kind of there. And then I kind of looked over, and it was during that scene, and I was like, man, Punch Drunk sounds pretty cool, but
yeah.
Well, let's go with Punch Turkey. I mean, it's funny. The initial premise of the show wasn't supposed to be true crime. It was going to be more comedic, so to speak. And so we thought it'd be funny to put it that way. Once we started deep diving into true crime and people started watching us, we considered changing the title. And then we're like, nah, that's just who we are.
Right. You're drunk turkeys.
Exactly.
You're all drunk. And I met Big Blue. The other one I did not meet, but he was fantastic as well. Very, very nice guy. And as are you, Daniel. And so
appreciate that.
And I thank you very much for coming on the show. And we're going to talk, well, you're kind of the Idaho Four guy. I mean, you that's really how your show started to break out into true crime, was the coverage of the Moscow Idaho murders, correct?
To a certain extent. The first one was actually the arrest of Richard Allen. That was the initial first true crime show we did. We had really no idea anything about that case. And so he got arrested. We looked at the probable cause affidavit. We looked at a lot of different things, and you can kind of tell we didn't know what the hell we were talking about because we were pointing in the wrong direction. Like, oh, I think this guy went this direction. And sure enough, it was obvious it wasn't. And there was a lot of things we didn't know about it. But as things started to progress with the probable cause affidavit, and then I started going through certain things, the Ronald Logan documents, I realized that it was what the picture was and how and what occurred that day. And so that's really what threw us out there. It was actually a video that we did, which was a timeline, and we put it on a map of Richard Allen's story of where he went to the bridge, what time he showed up there. We had the witnesses. We pointed it all on a map. And I'll be honest with you, outside of this ID stuff with KOHBERGER, I think there's a stronger case for Richard Allen than KOHBERGER.
Well, yeah, I think that there's a strong case against both of them. I don't think that either one of them would be arrested if there wasn't a strong case where a judge signs off on a, I think you only need 51% or
correct,
something like that. And so, there are certainly, there is certainly evidence against both. Richard Allen's biggest issue is going to be placing himself at the scene of the crime with his bullet, his unspent bullet. Now, ballistics can be debated, and they certainly will have to be in this case, because if they don't, he's as good as cooked. I saw a picture of Richard Allen the other day. Did you see that photo where his hand? Yeah. What did you make of that? That was odd. Not that I really care.
Right. There does come a part where there's unusual and cruel punishment, and not allowing him to bathe but twice a week and have to wear the same soiled clothing. It kind of falls under that line. Now, I'm not, especially if he ended up committing this crime.
Right, but he's innocent until
exactly.
He's awaiting trial. But the my question is that how everybody there gets treated? I think it's a pretty crappy place.
Yeah, it does. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact of the size of where he's at. He's in a smaller county, I believe, out there in Delphi. It's not a big place, not a big location. I'm not sure where he's being housed at, but I don't think it's a prison because he hasn't been found guilty or anything like that. So,
no, I don't think so either.
He might be housed in a place that's typically used for people that are going to be there for a short period of time. And so they may not have the facilities for what you would expect out of maybe perhaps a larger facility. However, I think that it's not right. He's being treated unhumane, and if it ends up finding out that he's guilty, then put him back. But
right. Well,
then take his life.
If he's found guilty, I could care less what happens to the guy. But but he is awaiting trial, and he does have the presumption of innocence. However, if that's how that goes in that jail, I don't want him to be treated any different than anybody else that's in that jail. Right. I get that he's high profile, and that's going to change a lot of things. And we'll get to KOHBERGER here in a minute, because I'm sure he's got, we'll talk about what his life is like a little bit in jail. But with Richard Allen, as long as he's not treated any different than anybody else, I think when I saw that picture, the lock, and it looked like his lawyer took that photo. Did that? And maybe he twisted his hands weird and drooled on himself. I don't know. Do you think that's a possibility?
I think it is. And it might also be a bit of what's the word I'm looking for? A strategic. You know, when you look at supposedly Brian Kohberger's lost a lot of weight too while he's been in jail. And, you know, we haven't seen pictures of him since, you know, he initially, you know, made his last court appearance. And so it's been a while. There's been rumors that he's lost a lot of weight, and it's probably because of the facility that he's at also. He's not even made a plea yet. So he's in a holding facility designed to be utilized for a short period of time. And so, you know, sometimes in my opinion, if you're going to, you know, you might make yourself look skinnier and frail, so that way you can convince a jury that you're not capable of committing a crime that was committed based on your strength and your size.
Right. And so, like I said, everybody, Richard Allen and Brian Kohberger, both innocent until proven guilty. They're headed to trial. They are charged with multiple murders, 6 between the two of them, possibly more. I hear now Kohberger is being investigated for some other murders or disappearances. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Brian Enton from News Nation came out saying that there was 2 counties that were looking at 2 possible murders or 2 situations that they're looking at him for. We have looked into a couple of cases that were out in his area that kind of fit a similar MO. One of them being Courtney Stauffer, who disappeared in 2012 out of Lancaster County area, Palmyra, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour and 40 minutes to 2-hour drive from Kohberger's family home out there in the Poconos. The thing about it is, and kind of found this out today, is that, you know, Kohberger's sister graduated in 2012. Not in that area. It was probably an hour away, but from my understanding, a lot of the college students that were in that area would go down to Harrisburg and to Hershey's. That was the spot to hang out. And so there was a young lady that went. She disappeared. She was blonde, you know, young lady, 21 years old, disappeared in the middle of the night after 4 a.m. Somebody was left alive in the house. It's believed probably something. There was no sign of any type of disturbance, no sign of a break-in, nothing. She just kind of disappeared the next morning. Nobody's found her for 10 years. And come to find out that that she was selling some narcotics apparently, and that there's been some rumors that this was a drug deal gone bad type of thing. You know, I was looking at a couple of things in Kohberger's past. It stated that he was a senior when he started, you know, abusing heroin and began to lose weight. Well, that would have been that following after that summer, or during that summer that he started abusing heroin and started this weight loss journey of his. That's probably not a healthy one, obviously.
He looks, I mean, I don't know if he was currently abusing drugs or not. Do you know if he was when he was arrested? He looked pretty fit.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think this was a problem that he had early on in his life. We had talked to actually a friend of Kohberger's named Bree. She came out on the show. She stopped being friends with him around senior year because of the fact that he was changing a little bit because of the narcotics that he was abusing. Yeah. And so she said that he had contacted her after the fact, said a bunch of things that, you know, he was like a security guard at a high school at that point or something like that. And that he had been clean and sober for a while and was, you know, following a criminal justice path in college. And so is it possible he relapsed? Maybe, perhaps, but I don't think there's been any evidence to point at that.
Interesting. So, you know, I think that's always going to be something, because they were doing the same thing with Richard Allen, where they were looking at him for another, and that's kind of, I think that's kind of standard when you put somebody in jail awaiting trial for a quadruple homicide, you're going to take a look at other similarities that for unsolved cases. All that means is that that's all they're doing. It doesn't mean anything else. Then, so, you know, obviously we don't know. We're not really sure of that. However, it is interesting. And, but let's talk about, so let's just get into the case a little bit here of the Idaho Four. So when when the murders happened, right, and the weeks following, there was just nothing but confusion and panic, and Moscow Police Department says, there's no threat to the public, and I'm like, well, that can't be true, because if you don't have somebody in custody that has committed, or that you think is the person that committed the quadruple homicide, there's going to be a threat to the public. There's no way. So I think that was right there. That was kind of the very first, like, whoa, what do you mean? And then they came back and talked about it, whatever. Do you think, that confusion right there kind of set the public on it, like, what's going on here? Because I'll tell you what, if I lived in Moscow when that happened and there was a triple or a quadruple homicide, suspect out there somewhere, murderer, I wouldn't be very comfortable. Right.
Yeah, no, you really wouldn't. And I think that the reason why they suspected is a few reasons. One, we've recently found out that an ID was missing, right? Or not missing, but there's been suspect that there's a possibility that an ID was found.
Where's that come
from? That came from News Nation. You got to take it for what it is. But yeah, apparently there was an ID found that might potentially connect back to one of the victims in the Idaho Four. Now, when you look at the warrants that were seized, there was ID cards that were found in a glove inside of a box at his parents' residence. And so some people are kind of putting those two things together. If there was an ID card missing during the first day of investigation, and one person had significantly more injuries, and you were able to go through some of their messages or whatnot through their phone, and there was, or maybe not that aspect, because I don't think they were on KOHBERGER at that point. But if they had an ID missing and they had one person had more serious injuries than the others, then you can suspect that there's possibility that it was targeted. Also, you have to remember that Kaylee had just gone through a breakup. She'd only been single for about 3 weeks. The ex-boyfriend was with her that night up until about 12:30. And they called him several times that night. And so I'm strongly suspect that the police department were keying in on Jack DeCour early on until he no longer became a suspect.
Right.
However, with everything kind of outlining in front of him, you have an ex-boyfriend, been broken up for 3 months. He was there with them at the corner club till about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. They called him several times throughout the middle of the night. He didn't answer. Kaylee's parents called him at 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the afternoon when news media broke about the incident. He didn't answer the phone then either. If I was an investigator, that's the first place I would look. You see that Kaylee potentially had more injuries than the others. And so you would start to build an idea that there's possibly a targeted event here. Most of the time when you have an incident where somebody's life is taken with a knife, it's usually pretty personal. And so I think that all those things kind of led the police department to feel that this was a targeted event. Now, once they changed it to, okay, we didn't know if it was a person or the house, I think it's at that point when they realized that possibly Jack DeCour wasn't involved. They already put out that it was a targeted event, so they couldn't really take that back. And
I remember that whole house or people. Mm-hmm. Why would it be a house that's targeted?
Well, there's been a lot of rumors that there's been that house was a trap house of some kind, that drugs may or may not have been sold there. Now, there was parties there that had people upwards to 150 people in that house. I'm not sure if you were aware, but the sororities that Kaylee was a part of, which was a different one, I can't remember off the top of my head which one she was, but the other ones were Pi Phis. Those two sororities were the only two that were under probation for drug-related and alcohol-related events. And so, the fact that they called other friends over before they contacted the police department, I mean, those things kind of would lead you to believe maybe perhaps somebody went in there thinking that there was something to find or robbery, that these people were an easy target because of how many people showed up at that house. That might be why they would have said that, but
to
that
stab
doesn't,
more people to death.
right. There's a lot of houses in that neighborhood that have
Most
parties.
people,
And
when they go to
so,
rob, use a gun.
right. Right. And Kohberger at least had access to them. So,
Yeah, well, now it's been reported that he followed them on Instagram.
correct.
Is that true?
I've had people send me some stuff about his picture, but I don't know if they're fake Instagram profiles. I don't think they're real, just because the ones that I've seen, the screenshots, they don't have any posts or anything. So it could be somebody that changed something. However, police did come out and say that he had pictures of at least one of the victims on his phone, and that he had messaged at least one of them several times through social media, and that those messages were in the requested message component. So
Right.
they're not even sure if they actually read them or not. It could have been possible that they never even saw those messages come in, but those things are true as far as that goes.
Well, young ladies like that probably receive a lot of unsolicited messages from weird guys that they ignore. They may have not had any communication with him whatsoever, but obviously, well, I don't know. Obviously, I'm sure that this was a targeted attack. I don't see any other way. I mean, do you think that there's any chance that it wasn't targeted? Like this couldn't have been random.
I mean, maybe. The one thing that I can think of is there's a lot of weird coincidences with other serial killer type cases that are out there. Like, for instance, if this was his first time, him going into a house, taking 4 lives, that's very similar to BTK's first time. He was 28 years old as well. You look at Ted Bundy going into a sorority house and attacking women in a sorority house. You look at, him also going to Bundy, that is, going to Utah and Washington to commit crimes and then traveling across country to Florida. You have Golden State Killer, who was a law enforcement. And so, you have all these criterias that match certain things. And then you look at some of the stuff that he was putting out there, like, for instance, on Reddit, he was inquiring ex-cons who have been committed or who has been accused or found guilty of committing aggressive offenses. And he wanted to know certain things like emotions, thoughts, what made you choose certain people, what were your thoughts and emotions during the commission of the crime. Some really weird stuff. Now, he was a psychology major and a criminal justice major, so understanding the mind of a criminal and why they're doing certain things would kind of fall into the line of his studies. And so I do want to emphasize that.
Yeah. I remember when reading about the ancestry, that he submitted for an ancestry test. Any truth to that? That's according to to the guy that lived next door to him.
Right.
That would never hang out with him. It was always like, what are you doing? He's like, nothing. Like, well, and then basically just stopped, messaging with him because he thought he was weird, right?
Kind of, sort of. I mean, a lot of people, I don't think a lot of people are going to come out and say, hey, I thought he was normal or any of those things based on what he's accused of. So a lot of people are probably going to be persuaded to say negative things about him just because they don't want to be associated with him in that manner. And so that's possible. There is one thing that I've seen, and it's pretty crazy, man. It was a news channel that was out there and actually interviewed one of his other neighbors. And they didn't show that interview, but the reporter said that apparently the night of the issue that Kohberger seemed normal and that he had a girlfriend an Asian girlfriend that would frequent his apartment. And it kind of sounded like he may have been with her that night or something like that. So I don't know how accurate that is. I know that video has been pulled down. I found it on other places of people that have screen recorded that. And so it's interesting, to say the least.
So there's this, somebody just put it in the comments too. This is what I was going to head to. Why do you think they have an internal affairs situation going on that could threaten the case? What do you tell me how you feel about that, and tell me a little bit about that, because I'm not up to speed on that.
So the city of Moscow the police department there has been under a lot of scrutiny. It started back with the pandemic. They were emphasizing the masks, and there was a situation where Moscow Police Department Chief Fry, they arrested a couple of people for
the church thing, right?
Yeah, the church thing. And so what ended up happening was these students from the college created a sticker with the Moscow Soviet Russian slick or whatever you call it, and it said "We enforce because we care," which was the slogan for that was the slogan for why they were enforcing the masks. And apparently some kids ended up putting that sticker on a pole, right? And two officers, the first two that actually showed up to the house, which was and I have it here, give me a sec. It was Nunez, and it was, oh gosh, what was his last name? The other guy. It was Officer Nunez and Gunnarsson. And they ended up separating these guys and interviewing them and arresting them without reading their Miranda rights. They talked to the juvenile without the consent of the father or a magistrate's order, things of that nature. And then they began to hide evidence in that case. The evidence that they hid was the body cam footage. The kids claimed that their rights were violated. The police said that there was no body cam footage. A year later or so, body cam footage comes out, but no audio. And so they're like, all right, we have the body cam, but not the audio. And come to find out, apparently these officers had lied under oath saying that there was never any body cam footage. Well, it was found. And now they're saying there's no audio, which is unlikely. So those things do make things look kind of weird. Like if they're willing to lie and suppress evidence for a sticker. I mean,
yeah, but what does that have to do with this case?
Well, with this case, you have those two guys entering this house to begin with. Now, the biggest situation is going to be the knife sheath. When you look at the knife sheath, from my understanding, one of those officers reported saying that he was later notified that there was a knife sheath there, and one of them said that he later noticed that there was a knife sheath next to Maddie's bed on her bed next to her body. So it becomes a question as to when did that knife sheath show up, because it wasn't in one of those officers' paperwork. Now, when you look at the probable cause affidavit, Sergeant Payne says that you can see the knife sheath from when you're viewing the scene from the bedroom door. And so it comes the question is like, why didn't the other officers see the knife sheath? Why did one of them have to be later notified that there was a knife sheath there? And
in your opinion, and I'm asking you to speculate and put your turkey neck out there and all that stuff. But couldn't it just been looked over?
Possibly.
A lot going on, dude. There's a lot going on in that house. When you show up there's 4 slaughtered humans,
Yeah, it's just so. In Sergeant Payne, he says both Gonsalves and Mogan were deceased with visible stab wounds. I later noticed what appeared to be a leather tan knife sheath laying on the bed next to Maddie Mogan's right side when viewed from the door. And one other person in here, and I don't have it with me, said that he had to be notified. The knife sheath isn't small. It's a pretty large sheath. It fits the knife. So you would assume you would be able to see it, especially when viewed from the door. Now, possibly it was covered in blood, and so it may have blended in.
Let me really fast. I'm sorry to interrupt, but where would they go? Like, so the thought is that it's possibly planted.
Right.
Where are they going to get a K-bar knife sheath from to plant?
I get that. I understand that.
In that amount of time.
Right.
So
well,
it was found when
it was noticed by the time that Sergeant Payne walked in there at 4 p.m. So there's a 4 hour time frame there from the time that 911 call came in to the time Sergeant Payne walks in there and later notices it. So it's after 4 p.m. that it's noticed.
And the other question would be, well, what about how the single source of DNA? How would they get his print on there or whatever they have?
Well, I mean, to just speculate on that, I'm assuming they may have had some, they were watching him for a minute. They even watched him put trash in the neighbor's house and supposedly didn't collect anything. They just watched him, which is weird. They waited a couple of days. You would assume that if he's throwing trash in a neighbor's yard, you would go pick up that piece of evidence. But they just
wouldn't know
him.
that it was a K-bar knife at the time.
When they were watching him?
No, when somebody supposedly planted, if that sheath was planted.
Well, I mean, I guess the one main reason you would assume that it's a K-bar knife is because there was 4. You would need a knife that's pretty sturdy, a knife that's gonna go through. And I don't want to put it in this manner, but 4 victims, and it also has a guard, so that way you don't slip and it doesn't cut yourself. And so I'm assuming that they probably assumed that it was either a K-bar or a K-bar style knife because of those things, the size of the wounds, the type of wounds that you're seeing from the body, the size of the gouges, probably even it's described that, he punctured organs and things of that nature. So I would assume that he'd also hit rib cages and bones and things of that nature, which would also have, they would leave damage that would kind of point to a certain type of weapon. You would figure that it's a fixed blade knife. You'd probably be able to figure the size of the knife, the width of the knife, all the dimensions of it, and you can probably deduce it down to certain types. I know they looked at K-bar and Blue Ridge.
Yeah, well, so I get the fixed, but I get all of that, but cops aren't trained in that kind of like forensic, crime scene investigating. I mean, they're not gonna know it all.
No, not at all. Not especially right then.
So for someone to say, "Hey, I think this is a K-bar knife," you got a sheath somewhere that we can go find and put a single source of DNA on the button and then leave it here. I mean, that to me just sounds asinine. But I'm sure the defense may try to use that, but you could just punch holes in that all day.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. And I don't think the sheath, whether it was planted or not, is gonna be what KOHBERGER is gonna be laying on as far as the defense. I think when it comes to it, he's gonna be trying to take apart the DNA evidence.
Right.
Is touch DNA, how accurate is that DNA? Is it possible that he touched a knife sheath somewhere, maybe in his profession, at the school, whatever the case may be, or maybe he lost it? He could have also gone as far as say that he's been in that house before. There's been a lot of people in that house, and that maybe he left it behind at one point.
Yeah, so, I got a comment telling me that somebody lived right down they're like, I drive that kind of a car. I'm not gonna go talk to the police. I actually left town. I've given some of those kids rides before, and this was before KOHBERGER and anything, and it probably was just somebody like trolling or whatever. I have no idea, but what they said was, he could have definitely been there, but like if he's walking around with a K-bar knife, I think people probably notice.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe Brian Kohberger does show up to a party. Oh, sorry. I think we just cut. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I saw you. You froze there for a second.
Good Lord. God, man, I've been having those kind of issues on my stream labs. Now I'm using StreamYards, but I've just been getting like it'll turn on and I'll be like, oh, hey, everybody, even though I'm not really doing anything yet. And then it'll turn off when I am doing something. So that's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But anyway, so Kohberger, what's the biggest piece of evidence that you think in this case is going to be an issue for Kohberger?
Well, if there's any blood in his car, I think that's going to be the deciding factor. If there's any DNA in his car from the victims after that search, I mean, he's done. If these IDs, if there is one from the victims in his, parents' house that he took with him, that's going to be hard to explain. I think those are going to be your biggest pieces of evidence against Kohberger that he's going to have a difficult time explaining. Now, if the car comes back clean, I mean, I have a hard time finding that they're going to be able to convict this guy, even if he had the IDs.
Well, wasn't he scrubbing it anyway?
Yeah, but to get it out of the brake pedal, the gas pedal, the seats, the headrest, the door panel, the roof, the headliner, everything there, it's going to be virtually impossible to get.
What if he has that dog's dog hair?
That's true too. If he has the dog's dog hair, there's a possibility, unless he comes back and says, I was in that house before. There was a house party on September 1st. I went in there. I may have sat on something and picked up that dog hair and it transferred with me to my house. Yeah,
but I don't, and I agree with you, because what you're going to have to do here with him, he's got a lot of explaining to do.
Right.
Meaning, so why'd you turn your phone on or put it in airplane mode when you did? Do you have an alibi? Were you in the area? Why'd you follow these girls on Instagram? And why do you fit the description from an eyewitness that you were in the house that day?
Right. And so when it comes to the case, the prosecution is going to want you to look at things from 1,000 feet, right? They're going to want you to say, all right, this Kohberger matches the description, height, weight, has the bushy eyebrows, drives a vehicle that matches the description of the vehicle that was seen in the area. He also had his phone turned off during the commission of the crime. It was on prior to and afterwards. He was in an area that wasn't his house or his town when the phone did come back on. It was south of Moscow. You also have the fact that, you have the DNA on the sheath. You put all those things together, it looks pretty damning. Now, the defense team is going to look at that same information and say, well, let's look at the description. It was dark. Dylan only said the guy was 5'10" or taller with bushy eyebrows. How many guys in this town are 5'10" or taller with bushy eyebrows? And then you have the aspect of the white Elantra. They themselves, the police department, came out and stated that there was 20,000 vehicles that matched that description in the area. And so, all right, there's that aspect. And then you're going to look at the fact of the phone pings. On page, I think it's 14 of the probable cause affidavit, the police department put on there that on November 14th, his phone connected to a tower in Moscow, but they don't believe that he was there. So that then puts a question as to aspect of the reliability of the accuracy of those phone pings. And so there's a lot there to go back and forth. You have also the fact that how did Kohberger know that Kaylee was going to be there that weekend? Things of that nature, if Kaylee was the intended victim. And the defense is going to try to point the finger in another direction. And
that would be probably easy, though. Instagram, stuff like that.
There was one picture that she had posted, or that she had posted on Instagram. It wasn't one. It was a set of pictures with her and her friends outside of a house saying, I love to spend, my life with these guys or every day with these guys, something of that nature. But there wasn't one of her Range Rover. And the reason why that's important is she had just bought in that Range Rover. She hadn't put it on social media yet because she was wanting to surprise her friend Maddie. And she had just gotten into town the night before. Him pulling up to this house, 5 cars parked in front, a Range Rover he's never seen. Why would he go in there?
Let's talk about the shoes,
All right.
because there was a pattern, correct, that was left in the house, and that he owned some shoes that matched that.
No, not yet. So they found a one footprint in the house that was going in the direction of where Dylan said that she saw when she saw the perpetrator walking through.
Mhm.
And that shoe print had a cross design similar to the one that Vans wear. Now, there was receipts that were recovered from his house. Now, if there's a receipt that they're recovering, it's not going to be for bubble gum or for laundry detergent. It would have to have something under that you would assume would be relative to the case. So there's a possibility maybe he bought some Vans shoes somewhere, whether it was at Marshall's or whatnot. And that might be the tie. But when they arrested him, he had some size 13, I think it was Nikes and New Balances. It wasn't the Vans.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. And
Oh, and they also found some hiking boots and some shovels, plural, in his vehicle.
Of course they did. Every normal human keeps shovels in their car when they've been accused of murder. Now,
Yeah.
So I agree with you what you're saying about the outside DNA. Like if he took any DNA from the scene and took it outside, it doesn't even necessarily have to be in his car. It could be in his apartment. It could be on his mattress. It could be on his pillow. Who knows what somebody like that does after they commit the crime, but it sounds like they believe that he went back to his apartment, right?
A long way around, but yeah, he went.
Right, but he did supposedly did that on purpose,
Right.
According to them, according to the prosecution.
But here's the thing, and this is why I found that these other cases that here recently came out to be interesting. So in these other cases, and I'm talking about Courtney Stauffer, and I'm talking about Dana Smithers, who lived about 30 minutes away from KOHBERGER's family house and disappeared May 28, 2022. So right before KOHBERGER left, she disappeared. There was people in her house. They found her phone, her keys, a lot of things inside of her house. Very similar to Courtney Stauffer. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
What if the plan wasn't to commit the murder there? The plan was to take her, and he had a spot somewhere out in the woods, and that's where he ended up going anyways, to go dispose of his clothes, the knife, everything else. And that's the reason why he went southbound. I think he went in there. Maybe perhaps the plan was to take, let's just say it's Madison, right? Because that's been what's rumored of the girl who had pictures of on his phone. He walks into Madison's room, he sees Kaylee sleeping next to her. It's already not a good sight, right? There's people in the house. Maybe somebody wakes up. He has to do what he has to do right then and there. He hears Xana downstairs say, "I think somebody's here." So he knows that somebody else is awake. They've heard what he's done. So he goes down there, sneaks up on them, and commits that crime down there in that second floor. Dylan yells out, "Shut up," because that's what's been rumored, that she opened the door, yelled out, "Shut up." He was in the moment, tunnel vision, hears somebody yell, and it's time to go. That's two people that have yelled that he's heard. So he just takes off and splits. Now, if he thinks that somebody's going to call 911 at that point, you're going to be on the road for an hour, you're going to go straight home and get in your house.
I mean, you're not going to go right home, would you?
I mean, I wouldn't go the normal plan of travel, but there is a back road exiting out of that neighborhood that would take you directly to Pullman. And so, and he was going fast enough there. There's no way that police would have gotten there in time to have stopped traffic from leaving town, just like they didn't get there in time in the direction that he went. And so, it's basically turning right versus left if we were to look at that direction. And so he ended up leaving and exiting possibly on Paulus Road or Drive, which is south of where the victim's residence is. If you make a left turn from there, you end up hitting 95 South, and you take a right there, and you go about 10 minutes. You're exactly where he was when his phone turned off. You take a right, travel the same amount of time, you're back in Pullman.
Right.
So why go the other direction unless, you know, you're probably trying to get rid of some stuff and things of that nature. Maybe he did have a spot where he was planning on taking somebody.
Maybe, yeah, or you know, just to be like, well, I would always take this way home whenever I was in Moscow.
Now. Yeah, because, you know, that's one thing that just, you know, didn't make any sense to me. And, you know, looking at these other two cases, I was like, man, is it possible that his MO is kidnap, take out to the woods and do something there? And it was broken up that night. And that's why there was so many mistakes made. It wasn't
I don't think it went as planned. I don't think it went as planned at all. But there was somebody in that house, and I believe it was one of the two girls, Maddie and or Kaylee, and I don't know which, but I think that those, maybe both, I don't know, but I think that one of them at least was the target. And for some reason, and I don't know, I don't have anything to really back this up at all other than my own thoughts, is I think it's Kaylee, but I'm not really sure why I feel that way. I mean, do you think, not that it matters, I mean, it will matter at trial, but who do you feel? Do you think it was Madison?
I don't think it was Kaylee. I know there was a lot of speculation that it was Kaylee right away, just because she probably had, you know, it was described that she had more serious injuries compared to, or worse injuries. They described them as gouges and things of that nature. That made me also think that direction as well. But it comes to question, like, I think this guy planned this out pretty well. Let's just say his plan wasn't to kidnap them. His plan was always to go in there and commit this crime inside that house. I think he planned it very close to the vest here. So he went to work that following week, right? He was a teacher's assistant, so he went that Monday. If he would have committed this crime a week later, it would have been Thanksgiving break, so he wouldn't have been able to go to work. He also maintained and created a doctor's appointment for that week. Now, my thoughts are that he goes and commits this crime, and if he's able to do it as planned without coming back with injury, then he would be able to go to work and maintain his doctor's appointment in the manner that he did. And that would be highly unlikely for somebody to have committed a crime and to go do those things, because especially you would assume they would have scratches, cuts, things of that nature, defense wounds from the victims, right? Now, if he ended up getting cut up and scratched up, well, he could have, you know, there was a pretty horrific crime. A lot of people were canceling doctor's appointments and not going to school. So he would have had a reasonable opportunity to not go. So the fact that he went tells me that was part of his plan. He wanted to show people that his lifestyle didn't change. You know, he's a criminologist. He knows what red flags to look for. A lot of people think that he went back to the house. He never went back to the house but once. He went at 9 o'clock in the morning after the incident, probably because he didn't hear about the murders going on. And he went back, and that was the only time. So there's a lot of people that go and watch all these news broadcasts. Like, oh, why the launcher in the back? Why the launcher in the back? Well, if that why the launcher in the back was KOHBERGER, according to the police department, he never went back there. If somebody else is revisiting the crime, it's not KOHBERGER.
Okay.
So he knew what not. He wasn't at the vigil. He wasn't doing any of those things. He didn't insert himself in the crime. To me, he wasn't Papa Rogers. He wasn't inside looking, because all of those things are putting yourself into the crime. That's inserting yourself. Those are key clues that police officers and law enforcement look for when it comes to trying to find a criminal. And so he knows those things. And so one thing that I'll also say would be another piece of evidence that we don't know is they got his phone data. If he searched Moscow murders before the bodies were found, I think that's pretty. I mean, I think that's a pretty big piece of evidence if that ends up being the case. But if he didn't, it's going to be kind of hard to prove. You know, like I said, with this case, I'm on the fence whether it's him or not. It's going to come down to if they find DNA in that car.
So you don't think that even the single source of DNA is enough?
No, because it's a small source of DNA. It's touch DNA. Howard Bloom's article on this DNA, he described it as a speck of DNA. And then it was later told that Moscow Police Department, I don't know how true this is or not, didn't find any DNA until they sent it out to a lab in Texas. And supposedly they found the DNA on the sheath. And so the amount of it, if it's just a speck of touch DNA, I think that could be an issue. Sometimes touch DNA doesn't even see its day in court.
Sometimes, but I mean, touch DNA has been used to prosecute many people in the past.
Right.
And you and I have had this conversation about the touch DNA before, where you didn't think that it was as substantial as I do, and I think it's very substantial, just because I mean, the term single source DNA tells you everything you need to know about that DNA. There's only one person that it belongs to. How the hell does it get in there on a knife sheath of all things? I mean,
you're absolutely right.
Explain that away is going to be rough, especially with everything else that they have and I don't think that they've told everything that they have. I mean, when we talked about it, you said that you think that most of the evidence is out there. You still believe that?
I think up to the point where he was arrested. I think there's a lot of evidence we're not aware of, and that's after the fact. Up to the point where he's arrested, it's pretty late out there. You know, the way this was done by the police department was they had a witness statement. They checked out they did a video canvas. They found the white Elantra suspect vehicle 1. Then they went and got camera footage from Pullman, Washington, and WSU. And so they saw a white Elantra traveling around at 2:40 in the morning, and they probably saw it come back at 5 something in the morning. And so they're probably thinking to themselves, that's a little bit interesting. So they probably then narrowed their search down to Pullman, Washington, just based off of that video surveillance. So you have one leaving and one coming back.
Right.
And so you have that aspect of it. Then you find out that they go and tell WSU police that they're looking for a white Elantra. They end up going and finding Brian KOHBERGER's Elantra based on the fact that it was registered in. It had Pennsylvania plates, and what do you call it? It's known that Pennsylvania plates don't require a front license plate. The vehicle that was seen didn't have a front license plate. And so you see the fact that he matches the height and weight description of what Dylan had said, and he had bushy eyebrows. Now, all of that was found out by November 29th. Why did it take till December 23rd for them to get his cell phone pings? And it was December 23rd they get the cell phone. December 27th when they pull the trash. They get his DNA and they arrested him. Why did it take 24 days to do that? Not to mention, on December 7th, they throw out the fact that they're looking for a 2011 of 13 white Elantra. KOHBERGER drives a 15. It has a facelift, has different fog lights in the front, a couple of different things that have changed. Then nothing is said, and we find out later that on December 20th, there's a white Elantra crash in Eugene, Oregon. Find out by the Howard Bloom article that Chief Fry thought that was an important piece of information. They thought they got their vehicle. On December 20th, Brian KOHBERGER was already in the Pocono Mountains, and the police were aware of where he was at. They already had stopped him a couple of times in Indiana. They were aware of him, and they were aware of what part of the country he was at. So they knew he wasn't the white Elantra in Eugene, Oregon. December 21st is when they find out the white Elantra in Eugene, Oregon isn't involved. I think there's a bigger piece there that from December 23rd, when that white Elantra in Oregon is being ruled out, to December 23rd, when they're pulling his cell phone pings, I think it's because of that. I think it's because they ruled out that other guy. Now, they never changed the fact that they were looking for a 2011 to 16 Elantra. They never come back with that. So my question is, and you look at the probable cause affidavit, it states that it was a 2011 or 13, and then later was discovered that it could have been up to a 2016. My question is, when did they think that it could have been a 2016? After they already got Koberger on radar? That don't sound very like a very good evidence to me. And if I was, prosecute, or if I was a criminal defense attorney, which I'm not, I'd be harping in on that. And so those are those two aspects with it. Not to even mention, if you look at the probable cause affidavit, and this is the tricky part too when it comes to that vehicle, they say they have him pinged at his house at 2:42 a.m. and they have him on camera at 2:44, 2 miles south. So unless he's driving 60 miles an hour uninterrupted through town, how in the hell is he in two places at one time? Probable cause also says he doesn't leave his house till 2:47. That's when this ping starts traveling southbound through Pullman. So is it possible there was two white Elantras without a front license plate out and about at 2:40 in the morning?
Yeah, it's possible.
Okay, so how is it possible that the white Elantra that was in Moscow wasn't Brian's and it was the other one that was seen that left town?
Yeah, it's possible.
And so that's going to be some of the things that they're going to. Well, you also have to look at the fact that you had the video of the vehicle at 3:45 a.m., right? From the gas station. That vehicle was traveling from the east to the west towards the house.
And really fast. Let me just explain this to the audience really quick. We're just going back and forth on this. That, he's throwing out possible problems, and he's not defending Koberger.
Yeah, I'm not defending him. I've said it multiple times. I think they got the right guy.
Sure.
I don't know if they have enough to prosecute him. I'm fairly positive, and I'm not even a defense attorney, that I can bring up reasonable doubt in people's minds on this case, just based on what I see here. I think that you can, when you and I have talked, I think you've brought up some doubt, but I don't know how reasonable, like if it's, I don't think personally, if I was a juror, I don't think that that's enough to sway me. By the way, like I said, we don't even know everything else that they have, but I don't think that that would be enough to change my mind. Just some loose data issues, a couple, minute, I just. Well, how about this then?
Well, I can't get past a single source of DNA. I really cannot do that. That's rough.
No, yeah, it is. It is.
I mean, more, and we'll find out, because when this case goes right, and then we'll have this discussion again. I think that that's going to mean a lot more than you think it is.
Right. And, it could, but the biggest defense to that is not having to defend it at all. Having that type of evidence thrown out, especially if it was discovered by two guys that are on the Brady list. And so that becomes an issue.
Case.
It doesn't, but when it comes to Brady Gigolo, that does, because it comes into the fact of the credibility of the officers that arrive.
Right, but
that's a big question.
You go into the sheath issue. How would they know that it's a K-bar knife at that time, and then by 4 o'clock get
right? Nobody's saying that they planted it. What they're going to do is they're going to say that, hey, you have these two guys here. These two guys both lied under oath before. So anything that they have coming forward based off of their testimony should be, maybe not looked at so hard. And the judge is going to determine whether or not, just based off of those parameters, if it's going to be shown in court or not whether or not it's more than likely possible that they planted something. Because at the end of the day, somebody can plant something on somebody and they still be guilty of the crime. Look at OJ. And so
you talk about Mark Furman.
Yeah. And so
something on OJ.
Yeah, the OJ, the glove. And so
the glove was planted.
Yeah, it was.
The glove?
Yeah. I believe there was some evidence that was planted. I'm not familiar in that case, but I'm pretty sure. I thought it was. I could be wrong, but I thought it was.
It was evidence that was brought in. All they said was that it didn't fit him, not that it was planted. Mark Verman got in trouble for making
racial slurs.
Yeah.
Now, if it didn't fit him, I mean, is it possible that he used a smaller glove to commit that crime? Maybe.
No, they fit perfect. I watched the video. It was just he just struggled to put them on, and it didn't matter anyway. They were going to acquit him no matter what.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get what you're saying.
So when you have those type of questions, it's going to be, scrutinized, especially now that you have so many people that are bringing up this piece of evidence of the fact that you have these two officers who had found the sheath and all this other stuff. They're going to look at that.
So there you go. So Furman was the one that found the glove, but he's also the one that made a bunch of racial remarks.
Right.
So that,
Right.
okay. So, and that is right. So yeah, that did bring some, I get what you're saying. And I understand that, but it's, I mean, his blood was on the damn thing, on the glove,
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know much about DNA markers or anything like that. Have you ever looked at OJ's like DNA marker sheet?
No, I didn't.
Dude,
I didn't.
His DNA is everywhere in that crime, and he still got up. But that obviously was a long time ago, and people, but jurors do not understand DNA that well. They just don't. And so if you can avoid the whole DNA, breakdown, it's really, really, really tough. Did you put something in the back chat? Because I can't even find it.
In the what?
The back chat.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Oh, okay. I just didn't know. Okay. I don't even remember where I was, but we were talking about his DNA was everywhere, and the jurors didn't understand it. They still don't understand DNA very well. Right. I mean, that's why you have people. So DNA is not the gold standard that everybody thinks it is. I've seen cases, and like you said as well, I have seen cases where judges throw out DNA evidence that they were just like, well, we're not familiar enough with this type of testing. There's this one it's called Star Mix. I think it comes out of New Zealand, and it's used all over now, but back in like 2012, 2011, it was put into a case, and they're like, well, this isn't really, it's only probability DNA evidence, but the probability of it was like that there was a 1 in 36 million chance, that it was somebody else or something like that. And they threw it out, which was crazy to me, because I was like, what are you talking about? There's only like 40,000 people in that town that it happened and all this stuff. So judge, I think that the judge is going to have to let them argue the evidence and not get that. When judges get overly involved like that, that's where the problems happen. That doesn't mean he's guilty or not guilty, but if they're throwing out DNA evidence, that's rough.
No, I know. I agree with you. It's one thing that I do agree with. It's just, there's going to be some actions of the officers prior to this incident that their credibility is going to become a question. And there's going to be that possibility that they do get it thrown out. Now, when it comes to KOHBERGER's defense team, their best bet is they're not going to be able to prove, you can't prove he's innocent. I mean, I guess you can, if he had an alibi or things of that nature, but it's easier to prove somebody did something than somebody didn't do something.
Well, the burden of proof is on the prosecution.
Right. And so when it comes to the defense, their biggest story or their biggest defense is going to be pointing the blame at other people, right? They're going to try to find logical reasons for that somebody else committed this crime. And so one person that I feel that they're going to do, and I think KOHBERGER's already put it out there when he was talking to his neighbor, he said that he thought it was a crime of passion. And so perhaps I think they're going to be looking at Jack DeCour. They're going to put the blame basically on him throughout the entire time. And I think they're going to, it could be persuasive. I mean, Kaylee wasn't there for a week and a half in Moscow. She showed up she was there Friday and was supposed to leave by Tuesday, go back to Coeur d'Alene because it was her mom's birthday and they were going to have a birthday party dinner thing for her. So she was only there for a little bit. She'd been broken up with Jack DeCour for 3 weeks. A week and a half after the breakup, she goes on a date with somebody else, right? You go and look at the grub truck video. Check it out. Go look at how often Kaylee's on her phone. Now that night, she was in the corner club with Jack DeCour. Jack DeCour was there. There was a picture that came out showing. A lot of people were kind of like, hey, is this Jack? Is it not Jack? Steve Gonsalves confirmed it was Jack DeCour. And so Jack was with her that night. Jack didn't answer his phone after 2:30, didn't answer his phone before the bodies were found or before. So in the morning of the incident, the Gonsalves family get a call, and they're told that Kaylee and a few of the people that were in that house were killed by a gunshot. They got that information wrong. It was just rumors spreading, right? And so they turned on the TV, and then sure enough, on the news, it says that there was an unconscious person or something to that nature, and police were on scene doing this, an investigation. They called Jack DeCour. He doesn't answer his phone then either. And so, he's out of commission or out of his phone's pocket for over 12 hours. Mm-hmm. During the commission of the crime, he was at least there. He was broken up during the time. You go and look at, I told Adam everything. According to Steve Gonsalves, that was Kaylee telling Adam that she was supposedly getting back with him. It doesn't sound like that. Supposedly, according to Kaylee's mom, Kaylee broke up with Jack DeCour. Kaylee went on a date a week and a half later where some guy called her a bitch, right? Mm-hmm. And so she then goes and calls. Yeah, she then goes and calls Jack DeCour and tells Jack that she went on a date and that some guy disrespected her, according to her mother, Kaylee's mom. And so they describe, here's the other thing. They've been together for 6 years. This is probably her first at everything and only at everything, right? You break up for 3 weeks and a week and a half, you go on a date with somebody else. Now, the reason she supposedly broke up with him was because she was moving. Now, she was moving to Texas for 4 months. You're going to break up a 6-year relationship because you can't be next to the person for 4 months? Right. Doesn't make any sense. Now, you go look at the Grub Truck video. She's constantly on the phone during that entire time, on the phone with somebody. And this is after somebody told Adam something. So if you go look at where that is literally, I think it was 70 feet away from the corner club where that footage was taken, or 180 feet away from the corner club. So right. Whatever Maddie told Adam got back to whoever, and I'm assuming it's Jack DeCour, according to Steve Gonsalves, it was Jack DeCour, got back to Jack DeCour, and he was texting her immediately about that. Look at the Grub Truck video. The entire time she's on the phone, people come up to her. They separate from her, and there's a matter of time where she's by herself, just constantly on the phone. That doesn't sound like a healthy relationship. In fact, I had people comment that on there when I brought that up, saying, I know what a toxic relationship looks like. And so you have this guy who apparently one of the text messages from Kaylee to Jack was, I need you to come over. If not, I'm going to take the dog. That doesn't sound like somebody that did the breaking up. Now, perhaps maybe Jack was hurt because she went on a date and didn't want to take her back or some of that nature. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But you expect me, or you're going to expect everybody to believe that, and this is what the defense is going to say, that you have this guy who was heartbroken, who had dated this girl for 6 years, who after a week and a half goes on a date with somebody else, who is with her the night of the incident, who also has some questions with his phone. I mean, you don't have to prove he's guilty, but you just got to make somebody believe that there's a possibility that he was enraged enough to go commit this crime with a knife. Because again, whoever did this went through 4 people. There was a lot of emotion, in my opinion, with a knife. A lot of emotion had to go through that. Mm-hmm. Now, if it's Brian KOHBERGER, what are the reasons? He got dumped. He got told no. Somebody denied him a date. How many other girls denied him a date when he didn't go do this to? Probably 100,000. The guy's a weirdo. But whether he did this or not, one thing I always just drove me nuts about the guy was that whole when he demanded that his aunt and uncle buy new pots and pans because he wouldn't eat out of anything that had been ever cooked meat before. And that just, and I get like there's a lot of vegan people that are kind of like that, but go buy them yourself. Like, shut up. Yeah. It's like Yeah, and I mean, you also have the fact that it sounds like he has some OCD tendencies, and this crime was described as very sloppy and messy. I mean, I'm not saying I like I said, when you look at it from 1,000 foot view, he's got the car, he's got everything, right?
Mhm.
Everything matches up. I think it's the right guy, but there's some questions here. Now, if the car comes back with blood DNA in there, he's
Cooked.
done.
His turkey's cooked.
Exactly.
His
If you
drunken
don't, that's when things get interesting. And when it comes to the probable cause affidavit, they put a lot of weight in what they're going to find after the fact, because all they had when they arrested him, or up until December 27th, was there was a white vehicle in the area that matched the description of his, that there was a that he matches the height and weight. And from December 23rd, they knew about the phone pings, which who's to say those are very accurate. In fact, they point one out on the probable cause affidavit as him being in the area, and it was one of the times was when he was pulled over. Well, he was pulled over on the main highway going between going into Moscow or leaving Moscow towards Pullman. It wasn't so much he was in the vicinity, but because he was just in the town, that shows up as him being in the vicinity.
Who ordered the DoorDash?
I think that was Anna.
And you think that was legit? That was just a coincidence?
Oh yeah. So here's my theory on what happened that night. My theory is I do think it was KOHBERGER. I think he did plan this. Like I mentioned before, he planned this. He wanted to go to work the next day. He wanted to take he wanted to do all those things that pointed him to be innocent, right? His goal was to eventually be a police officer or something. Maybe he thought he could solve or frame somebody else later. I don't know. But I think he planned this out fairly well. And I think when he got to the area, that DoorDash spooked him. There's several times that he passes by. Now, I think it's my assumption, especially at that time of night, that Kaylee probably ordered that meal a little bit earlier, probably around 3 o'clock, maybe even 2:30 in the morning. My assumption is that it probably took some time for her meal to get there. It probably was waiting a while. There may have been multiple drivers that didn't want to pick it up given the time of night and the distance that had to be gone. And so, in my opinion, is it possible that that order got there later than expected, and that that order was outside with the light on, and maybe that's the reason why KOHBERGER kept passing by. And then when he finally passes by, the light is off, the food is inside. All right, now it's time to go in. And so my assumption is that, and if you go look at the pictures, where the DoorDash order was at was behind the sink. My assumption is that she may have forgotten about it, or it was delivered late. The food was cold.
Shocker.
She didn't want it. Just threw it back there, knocked over a pot because there was some dirt around the sink as well. Knocked over a pot, picked it up, and went to bed. I don't think there was anything nefarious about it. Now, I know that the police department identified the DoorDash driver and cleared her. And I'm saying her because according to Jonathan Lee Richards Investigates, he went out there to the Jack in the Box and talked to somebody there. And supposedly they told him that the driver was a female. Now, the other thing they also told him was that he ordered bacon cheeseburgers, which don't jive with his, vegan style. But perhaps maybe it wasn't for himself. Like I said before, there was at least one news broadcast that speculated that he had a girlfriend. And so maybe that's who the cheeseburgers were ordered for when it comes to KOHBERGER.
There's no way that guy had a girlfriend. That to me would prove that, and then we'll talk about everything else. I mean, can you imagine? I remember one time I was talking about this case and I go, yeah, this is going to be some incel, loser, weirdo guy who, is at home eating top ramen out of the pan that he cooked it in. And I was sitting there thinking, I go, oh my God, that's what I did tonight. I can't even believe I just said that. But, first of all, I don't think he had a girlfriend, because I think that doors would be blown off of that. You know, has anybody talked to this supposed girlfriend?
Not that I could find. I did find another article that referenced, I think it was from the New York Post, that also referenced something similar to that, maybe having an acquaintance or a friend that would visit him. But yeah, no, I don't know who this is or any of those things. I'm not even sure how true it is. It could have been just some random guy. You know, he was claiming to be a news guy, because I didn't recognize him. I don't know what affiliation he was with. It's not very difficult to stand out in front of somewhere, record a video, and then throw on live WW4 news on the side and pretend you're a freaking, you know, a news broadcaster or whatnot. And
Give me a percentage. What do you think chances are that he's convicted of this crime?
Well, if he did it, there's going to be some DNA blood evidence in that car. And I'm fairly positive he's going to get convicted off of that.
It doesn't even, once again, it doesn't even have to be in his car.
Right. But I find it very difficult, given the description of what has been described of the scene and the fact that he took off at a pretty, you know, he was only in the house for a short period of time. And if he was in the house for a short period of time, and let's just say he did get startled by Dylan, he wouldn't have had time to clean himself up before he got into his car.
No, but you know, it also depends like what he was wearing. Did he cover the seats? Did he do this? Did he do that? I mean, look, he could have went Dexter on us and just shrink wrap the whole car if he's as smart as people say that he is. I don't think he's as smart as people say that he is. I'm sure that he's intellectually like book smart and stuff like that, but that's one thing. And then going out and carrying out this horrific, messy, chaotic murder, things go wrong fast. And I think that they did go wrong for him because of all the bodies, you know, that he did leave behind there. I don't think that was the intention. I think there was a specific target but imagine the amount of energy and rage that would have taken.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
It's an unbelievable crime.
Right. And that's why I'm like, when you look at it, it's like, hey, the 28-year-old criminologist, PhD guy that committed this crime, where you think there's a lot of emotion involved, or the ex-boyfriend that thought this was the woman he was going to marry and who started dating other guys through week and a half after they broke up. And to answer,
that's a defense that they're going to have to go down.
They definitely are.
Unfortunately for Jack. And that sucks because he's not on trial. He hasn't been. And there are still people that believe it's him.
Right. Yeah. I don't think it's him. I think the police department cleared him fairly well. You know, I didn't think it was him the longer it took for them to arrest Kohberger.
Yeah, they would have.
I felt that if it was that close, they would have arrested him. But to answer Erica's question down here about the DoorDash guy, I don't think it's him because they identified who that person was. And if it was Brian Kohberger, that would have put him at the scene, and that would have been in the probable cause affidavit.
Yeah. I know. So that's what they did in the Casey Anthony trial is they went after the dad. Mm-hmm. With almost no real basis other than like, yeah, she was down the hall from him and he was abusing her and things like that. But no, I think that's what they're going to do to Jack. I think, sure. But I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be surprised if that is where the judge does clamp down a little bit, because there are laws now about just casting a wide net on people that, you know, aren't involved in the case at all. I mean, they're going to have something to go off of other than just jealous boyfriend. They're going to have to present to the judge a reason why this is their defense, or else he's going to say, I'm not going to let you just completely ruin somebody's life just for the heck of it.
You're right. No, and I understand that, but you know, if the police department were looking at him heavily and they suspected him, then, you know, and it was brought up, I think it was by Jack DeCour's aunt. She came out and said that they suspected him heavily in the beginning. And so if they suspected him heavily, best believe that they're going to allow that type of stuff in there. You know, this was a guy that was the ex-boyfriend. He was with her the night of the incident at the corner club. There's picture footage of him sitting there talking to Kaylee. He was on the phone with her, and I'm sure they have those documentation up until at least 2:30. And, you know, you have the girls calling him without answer. And so you have him also not answering his phone. And one of the things that the probable cause affidavit says that they pointing the evidence towards Brian Kohberger is that sometimes during the commission of the crime, assailants will either leave their phone behind or turn it off, so that way they don't get tracked digitally. Well, you can kind of say the same thing if, and I doubt, let's just say it were to have been Jack, if he would have left his phone behind, that would have been a reason why he wasn't answering it when they were calling him. You know what I'm saying? And so you can kind of point that. And I actually put out a video that was called Brian Kohberger's probably most likely defense. And we talked about the white Elantra. We talked about the fact that when they, you know, when they figured that it was a newer Elantra, we talked about how Kohberger wasn't the first suspect. And we talked about they're going to be pointing the finger at Jack DeCour. And it's not that I believe that Jack's responsible, but this is something that the defense is definitely going to point at. And they don't have to prove that Jack did it. They don't have to prove
of course
that he's guilty. They just have to put doubt in one of those jurors' mind to make him say, is it possible that the ex-boyfriend had the motive, the means, and the opportunity to commit this crime? Because there's one of those things we're missing when it comes to Kohberger, and it's motive at this point. You know, we can speculate that he was turned down. We can speculate he's an incel and all these things. But
let me tell you about motive. All right. About this case, in my opinion.
Okay.
Motive doesn't matter, because if somebody's a sick, deranged human that is obsessive about things and they don't need, there's not, like in the Murdoch trial, motive does matter. In this kind of a case, motive could be nothing more than he was attracted to somebody that he couldn't have. And he knew that even without talking to her. Motive be damned. I don't think that you need motive in this case.
Well, I think you do when you start telling people this is targeted right off the bat. Why do you think it's targeted?
Yeah, it's targeted in his mind because he's a psycho.
Right. And I understand that, but the defense is going to come out like, oh, you can't come out there without motive because you have somebody who's in the circle here that meets possibility of motive. And, you know, if it was just that, like at 28 years old, we're to believe he just snapped. You know, he's been turned down many a times before. Many of his classmates and friends, even while he was under the influence of narcotics, was he turned down. And at least to our knowledge, he hadn't committed this like a crime.
Well,
like
that
this
doesn't mean that he just snapped and then kills people either. What I'm saying is the motive, like when you're talking about motives, when it comes to things like this, to me, it doesn't, and this is just me saying this, but the motive is so unimportant because, you know, you're like, well, he's a killer. That's what he does. He's psycho. He's nuts. He's, you know, that's, to me, that's enough motive. I mean, you read his writings and stuff, didn't you?
I read some of the things that he had put out there. I read the Reddit stuff. What writings are you referencing though?
I think they were broken by like the New York Post when you talk about like that. What is it that what was that noise that he would always hear, or just, you know?
Oh, he had visual snow. So what he was saying was that he had visual snow, and that that he was on certain medications that at that time where he lost emotion, lost feeling, he was going into all these things. And that's the reason why he turned to being a vegan. It's not because he cares for animals or things of that nature. It's because it helps him with those side effects that he was, you know, going through, and at least in his mind. I don't know how true or accurate those things are, but that's what he had indicated. And so, you know, if I was him, I'd say I was fine. I hadn't had those visual snow. I hadn't had those thoughts because I hadn't been on that medication, and I had been a vegan, which helps suppress some of those side effects. So those side effects weren't present during this time. Those side effects were present in his his late teens, early 20s.
Right.
And so, you know,
somebody wants us to the visual snow. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
so the visual snow thing was just basically, he claimed that he had visual snow, which is not really like it's not technically a real thing, like a real diagnosis. I will say that it is a real thing that I know happens because my eyes, I have keratoconus in my right eye and I have some problems with it. And I know what visual snow is because when I was young, I had that. It usually happened when I would read. I would get like what looked like, I'd be reading a book and I'd just be focusing on the book and I would see like this, like it looked like a white screen on the TV from the corners, and then it'd go away. It didn't affect me in an aspect of feelings or any of those things. And it only happened when I was reading. And so there's no non-emotion or none of that stuff. But I do know that people do see the visual snow, and it happens to numerous amount of people. So I don't think there was any correlation, but he had some other stuff that he was under certain medications that I think triggered his visual snow and other side effects, which also included the no emotion and stuff, because that's not a part of visual snow. Visual snow is just a visual thing, I believe. And
yeah, I think so too. And it causes uncomfortableness and anxiety and stuff like that. It's kind of like that what they call Stockholm syndrome. Like it's not an actual syndrome. It's just like what happened. You know the story behind Stockholm syndrome, right? Like the bank robbery in Stockholm, where they were in there long enough they didn't want to leave, and you know they don't really get to study people that supposedly have that very often because they don't leave, you know, or whatever. But I don't know if it's like a clinically documented thing, you know what I mean, if that makes any sense. And so but I would ask you this, when we're talking about motive, what would be Jeffrey Dahmer's motive? What would be, you know, what's his motive?
Right. Well, Jeffrey Dahmer was also a serial killer. We don't know that Brian Kohlberger is that. If Brian Kohlberger suffered from some of the things,
but his serial killer, is that a motive?
No, not at all. But then comes the question: is how many other bodies are out there, and why haven't we found them?
Sure, but I mean, yeah, but like I'm saying, yeah, I just think that the motive is. And that's just me. I mean, you think different than I do, and I respect everything that you say. You're pretty on point with everything, but I just don't think motive is important.
See, I wouldn't think motive was important if there was a trail of bodies here that were outside of this one incident. So if we found out later that there's, you know, Stouffer, there's Dana Smithers, there's another person somewhere else, okay. Now we can come up to the idea that, yeah, no, this guy is just a psychopath, like Jesse is saying right there.
Yeah, but he would have probably killed again. I mean, you know, so maybe he was on his way to being a serial killer, you know. But
that's possible.
It's just to me, motive like isn't that important. But now, like I mean, in the Murdoch case, it is important. It was important because I still have trouble going like, God, he really killed his family for that. But I mean, I think he did it. I think it was, you know, I think that there was sufficient evidence and testimony, but there wasn't really any like real DNA evidence or anything like that. He just basically lied about being there, and that really, you know, along with everything else, kind of cooked him. But there was no real DNA evidence.
Right. No, you're right on that case. And so I think motive does make a difference if somebody else has motive, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's one thing if,
but there's no evidence from. I mean, there was no evidence that indicated that he was a part of the killing.
Right. No, and I'm not saying that he is. What I'm saying is, when it comes to,
he's frozen. I'm frozen.
I'm frozen.
I'm frozen. We're back.
When it comes to him, like, yeah, I get your point. I just feel that in this case, it's going to be really harped upon the defense. They're going to bring it up quite a bit, and they're going to say, hey, you know, we understand that. And it's going to be like, who are you going to ask as a prosecutor, you know, does motive matter? There's no witness that you can ask in that setting, you know, does motive matter in this situation? You know, it's going to be objected right away. Now, I can guarantee you that the defense can then question motive on Jack. So it's not like the prosecution is going to be able to go up there and say, all right, maybe just in closing and beginning arguments, that's the only time they're going to be able to say that motive doesn't matter. There's not a witness that they can bring up to emphasize that. And so, but there will be witnesses that will emphasize the motive of others. And it's not just Jack. I mean, there's another person that was swatted on December 14th, 13th, a month later, Brent Kopacka.
I heard about
that. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, that guy threatened to take the lives of everybody in his apartment complex.
Right.
And so
there's a lot of crazy people out there. That's for sure.
Yeah, there is. And there was a guy that lived about a mile away from Kaylee's house who also, after the fact, and this guy was convicted of murder, only spent like 18 months in jail or some shit like that. It was, excuse my language, some crazy thing like that. You know, he was only in jail for like 18 months. They let him out on probation. And he stabbed himself in the arms and attempted to stab his wife. And this was shortly after this incident as well. And so there's some people in that vicinity that have committed some pretty heinous crimes or were accused of committing crazy crimes that were pretty close to this situation. So it's not just going to be Jack. They're going to bring up all these possibilities. And
they should. I mean, that's what they should do.
Right. And then they're going to ask the jury to say, what makes more sense to you, the 28-year-old PhD student that may have gotten turned down, or this person that's been convicted of murder before, or this person who threatened to kill all of the people in his apartment complex, or this person over here who was just broken up by one of the people that were there. And I think that's going to be a pretty powerful thing. Now, if they're, like I said, it don't mean anything if there's DNA in that car. You know, that's my 2 cents on that aspect. It don't matter. Any of those things don't matter.
Yeah, I think that the like you said, you know, is it the 28-year-old, you know, criminology student, this well put together young man who left single source DNA on the sheath of the knife that he stabbed them with? That would be my closing argument. But hey, man, I've kept you longer than I was supposed to. I'm so glad that we should do this again. I've really enjoyed this conversation. You're very sharp and you put it together very well. And at the top of the chat is pinned the Drunk Turkey Show. Please sub to that channel. And they do a great job covering the cases. They're sensible. They're nice. They don't really cuss that much. I don't know if you have or not. You guys do really well.
Yeah, we try not to use the vulgar language.
It's rough sometimes.
It happens every now and then, especially if I get
like when Big Blue
heated about something. Yeah, Big Blue, when he gets a little too drunk, some things come out of it. It's crazy. But
I love that guy. I also have a show. It's called Lab After Dark. I'd love to get all you guys on there, man. And we just have a blast and joke around, and it's a good way, you know, to get your show out there as well. And like I said, I appreciate you asking me to come on your show. And if you guys haven't seen that, I talk about the Summer Wells case over there. And like I said, there's stuff happening with that case. You know, it's slowly coming to a head. I can tell you that. Some man named, you know, people are going to make this big deal about this guy, Dudley Aitchen or whatever his name is, got arrested for meth trafficking today. I don't know if you heard about that, but he worked with Don. It's, in my opinion, means nothing because they all traffic meth and do it and whatever. But it is something that I will talk about. But, you know, people are going to be like, oh, well, Don, that's Don's number one suspect. Yet Don has claimed many times that the police have cleared him and that he has a substantial alibi. So good luck on that. But anyway, I appreciate you being here, man. Thank you so much. Once again, at the top of the chat, It's pinned. Go ahead and go subscribe. And I appreciate you for coming over. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Catch you next time. Well, there was Daniel from the Drunk Turkey Show. What a nice guy and very clever and smart. Thank you for making, I know you were busy today, and thank you for making the time. It's been a great show. Let me see. Northern Lights gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much, Northern Lights. It's very, very kind of you. Did somebody else do it? Why does it say 10 new members? I have no idea. I'm not sure. So we had Northern Lights. Did somebody else do that? Hold on here. I'm trying to look. I can't tell. Anyway. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for the likes and the super chats and stickers. Sammy gifted 5 memberships as well. Sammy, thank you so much. Sammy, I appreciate that. Another thing about StreamYard that sucks is that for some reason it won't let me pull that up. StreamYard sucks. I hate it more than anything. I wish that Streamlabs would get it together because they suck too. Anyway, it's a great show. Thanks a lot, guys.
There is no investigation. This boy has.
There is not, really?